Transitioning from a legacy system to an industry standard comes with a whole bunch of translation issues. In every industry, from healthcare to finance, transitions in technology can be incredibly painful. Today, we're going to learn from Joe Labbe, a pioneer in the data and knowledge management technologies ecosystem, about Sunset Point Software and their solution Legacy Snapshot, which transforms the organization's approach to legacy systems and paves the way for what we call the immortal enterprise. So, hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the AIP podcast. Once again, it's your host, Cheng. I'm the CEO and founder of Supercharge Lab, and I am gonna be getting you through today's podcast with the great Joe Labbe. And he is the COO of Sunset Point Software Incorporated, joining us today. Now, Joe brings over 35 years of cross functional experience as a senior executive, systems integrator, and developer. He has successfully guided two prior companies through exits. And at Sunset Point Software, Joe is overseeing the day to day operations, focusing on strategy, finance, and marketing. So today, we're going to be discussing the revolutionary concept of legacy snapshot, an innovative solution by Sunset Point Software that addresses the challenges of decommissioning, oh my God, the most painful legacy systems and managing technical debt and creating this really, really cool concept of the immortal enterprise. So, welcome, Joe. We are so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Anne. Great to see you, and thanks for having me on.
Joe, let's start with you talking a little bit about yourself, your background. How did you come to building this company, Sunset Point Software?
Sure, great. It's been a long journey. I started my tech career back in 1989, and for the first half of my career, I was a systems integrator doing custom software development and integrating commercial off-the-shelf software. And then in 2003, I got this crazy idea to start a software company, and that was a company called Ratchet Soft. And we had created, certainly, if not the first RPA platform, one of the first RPA platforms about a decade before the term had been coined. And I mention RPA because RPA, which stands for Robotic Process Automation, which is the software discipline of using virtual robots, software based robots, to mimic human behavior when users use a piece of software for the purposes of automating repetitive tasks and for pushing data in or extracting data out. And I mention it because it is an important part of what we do, along with AI. But RPA has now become roughly a $6 billion industry. It's a mainstream in the corporate enterprise, and it's a big part of what we're doing. In 2018, I sold that business to a company called Knowledge Lake, based in St. Louis, which is a intelligent document processing company. And about 3.5 years into a 4-year contract that I had with them, I started getting the itch to start another company. So I just fortuitously went for my annual physical, and that's where the idea for the company came from. I was sitting down with my doctor after the exam, and we're talking about the results, and he said, "Well, I've got your last 3 years of medical records here." And I said, "Well, wait a second. I've been coming here for over a decade. Where are all the other medical records?" And he said, "Well, we did a giant EMR conversion, or we converted our electronic medical record system from something called Allscripts to Epic, and we were supposed to bring over all of the medical records, but the vendor only brought over three. And if we wanted to get the rest, that would cost us about another $2 million. We decided not to do that. So he said, "Joe, if I need access to your medical records beyond the last 3 years, I need to send a fax to a lovely woman in Nutley, New Jersey named Mary, who runs our records desk. She will retrieve your records, put them in a FedEx envelope, and send them back to me in about a week." Well, that sounded preposterous to me for a multi-billion-dollar medical institution. And so I started doing some research, and I found out that this issue of migration and decommissioning legacy systems is a huge problem. In fact, when I started doing research for this, I met with the folks at Gartner, and one of their analysts told me that in the period of 2016 to 2019, in the United States, organizations have slated three times the number of systems for decommissioning than they did the prior 15 years, which included Y2K. So I knew we were on to something. And so my goal was to figure out how could we apply our expertise in RPA and the skills we were accruing in AI to solve this problem. And I think we've done it in a very elegant and very simple way.
That's really, really fascinating. So let's talk a little bit about legacy snapshot. What is it? How does it work?
Sure. So a legacy snapshot, it's a very simple concept. It is a document based representation of a legacy system at the time that it's decommissioned. So what we do is we use RPA robots to crawl through a legacy application, very much the way Google crawler crawls through websites. Well, we can crawl through any application, websites, mainframe systems, traditional Windows applications. We crawl through them and we're looking to grab four things for every record that an organization wants to preserve. We first grab a screenshot of every screen related to every record that the organization wants to maintain. We then extract from that screenshot all the information that's contained within as discrete data elements. And we'll talk about why that's important when we get to the search aspect of it. We also grab any documents that might be attached to those records. And if there are any reports, we could execute the reports and capture the output, something that we used to call back in the 90s cold computer output to laser disk. So I think I'm dating myself here. But we grab all that information and we collate it into a series of PDF files. It could be hundreds of thousands, could be millions of PDF files. But that's the way that we scale it. So we take that information out of a database that is proprietary and we put it into a format, into a packaging that organizations already know how to manage. Every organization that we're targeting pretty much has a enterprise content management system, and that's where those PDF files will eventually be imported into. So once we create the PDF files and we have all this metadata, the information about those records, we then import them into the organization's ECMS, and now those documents are available for retrieval. Organizations are able to search for them based on full text search that's in the document, any of the discrete data elements that we have extracted as metadata. And you can also converse with these documents through conversational AI, because as you know, documents are the lingua franca of conversational AI. So, isn't it a great idea to take this information, package it up so that a conversational AI engine can read it, understand it, and then users in the future can converse with it. And instead of looking for documents, can just ask questions and get answers. And then finally, we also have the ability to do what's called a deep link. So if I migrate information from system A over to system B, I don't have to bring everything over. I could bring over just stubs of those records. And then what we have the ability to do, again, in any application, is to put a button in that screen so that when the user clicks it, we read the screen, understand what the context is, understand what the user's working on, and then say, hey, I know about that patient or I know about that customer, and I've got a bunch of legacy snapshot documents that you might find interesting. Do you want to look at them? Do you want to ask any questions of them? So that's the beauty behind taking what seems kind of unintuitive to take information out of a database and put it in documents, but there are lots of good reasons for doing it.
That's amazing information. I've had a lot of interesting experiences with very old school methods of, handling outdated systems. For example, we see a lot of people abandoning historical data or, mothballing and migrating raw data to SQL. How does Legacy Snapshot just you know transform these methods, and how does it make it much more efficient and effective?
Well, you've identified probably the three or four reasons why we exist. And that is because when I was doing the research, I had to go find out, well, what is the state of the market? How is this problem being solved today? And what I found out is it's not being solved well, and people aren't happy. Abandoning historic data, especially as industries become more regulated, is kind of a no go item because once that information is gone, The only way to get it back is to try to recreate it, and that creates tremendous compliance risks and exposure for the organization. So, very few organizations, except if you're dealing with maybe a defunct business, are abandoning information. Mothballing sounds like a good idea, where you basically take that physical system, you wrap it up in bubble wrap, and you put it in some far flung region of a data center. The problem with that is, while that system is wrapped up, it's not getting any software updates. It's not getting any security patches. So it is falling further woefully behind the rest of your system's infrastructure. So if you are able to even boot it when you need it, it now represents a point of exposure, a security point of exposure. It can be hacked, et cetera, et cetera. So mothballing seems like a good way to do it, but you really run into these issues when you try to bring the system up. And by the way, you're not really getting much benefit because you're still carrying the hardware costs. You probably have a software maintenance contract with a vendor, and you're keeping probably some people around that you could repurpose to do something else, but you keep them around purposely for the skills they have in this system just in case. Probably the most common thing that we see is a migration to SQL. Seems like a great idea, where you extract all the raw data, and I use the term raw data specifically because that's what it is. When you divorce it from the user interface, you don't have information, you have raw data in a bunch of data tables. And so when you migrate data over to SQL, you are preserving it. So you can check the box that, well, we have it. If we ever need to find it, we could somehow go try to figure out where it is. The problem is a lot of times that information is spread out in a data architecture that nobody around still understands because by definition they're old systems. So there's probably very few people who understand the data structure of that. So when they do their migration over, they're hoping that they're doing the proper joins and the connections to the various tables to expand it so that we have something useful in the end. And let's assume you do all that and everything works great. You have somebody who understood the architecture of the old system. They were able to bring it over. The problem is now you've got all this data sitting in a bunch of SQL tables. And so you have to ask yourself, do my people have the requisite skills to now find that information? Do they know how to form SQL queries? Do they know how to use tools like Tableau or Power BI to be able to make it what we call operational? And in most cases, they don't. So the information is locked away in a SQL store somewhere that nobody uses. And we think that is a huge opportunity lost. And that's why we talk about the immortal enterprise and keeping information operational. And then full migrations, as you heard with my doctor story, it rarely happens. It's expensive, it's time consuming. It requires knowledge in both systems, the old system and the new system. And even if you get it all converted correctly, you still lose something in the translation. What makes us different is that we are bringing over the information with near 100% fidelity with the original system, and we're keeping it operational so that people not only have it for compliance purposes and looking things up, but they could now use it for analysis on an ongoing basis. It becomes part of the organization's ongoing knowledge base, again going back to the idea of immortalizing this information to inform future decisions.
That's been amazing. Joe, that's all the time that we have for today's podcast, but it's been such a great time spent with you. Thank you for sharing such amazing insights. It's transformed my knowledge as well as I'm sure a lot of members of our audience. Thank you for sharing how, one of the biggest struggles for a lot of us technology providers, in software decommissioning and transitioning to building the immortal enterprise. To our audience, if you have enjoyed this episode, please like, follow, and share it. Your support means so much to us, helping us bring more valuable contents like this and exciting guests like Joe to the show. Thank you for being part of this episode, Joe. My name is Anne, CEO of Supercharge Lab, and your host. I'm signing off.
Thank you, and I really enjoyed it. Have a great day.